Ever feel like your team is working hard but not always on the right things? The problem might not be your people, it might be a lack of clarity. And today's guest, Melissa Ortiz, is the founder of Activate Human Capital Group and a leading expert in employee engagement and team performance. She works with leaders to define roles, align expectations, and make more informed hiring and leadership decisions using the Predictive Index. If you've ever struggled with accountability, ownership, or finding the right people for your team, this episode is for you. And here's why this topic matters for today. When roles are unclear, people flounder, even the best ones. It creates confusion, stalls momentum, and leads to disengagement and turnover. Melissa helps founders and teams move from assumption to alignment. Using tools like the Predictive Index, she brings clarity to roles, structure to expectations, and insight into what drives behavior so you can put the right people in the right roles and help them succeed once they're there. In today's episode, we're going to discuss why clarity is the foundation of confidence and performance, how to spot and fix assumed clarity in your team, and how Predictive Index helps leaders build better teams faster. So let's dive in. Hi, I'm Derek Fredrickson. Welcome to the COO Solution Podcast, the show for business owners and visionary leaders who want to scale with clarity, confidence, and the right support. For over 16 years, I've been in the trenches as a fractional COO, Chief Operating Officer, helping entrepreneurs align their teams, streamline operations, and remove bottlenecks that slow growth. I understand the challenges, feeling overwhelmed, stretched too thin, or uncertain about how to scale without burning out. I've helped business owners move from chaos to clarity, creating businesses that run smoothly and grow and scale. Each week, I'll bring you real-world insights, proven strategies, and practical solutions to help you step into your highest role as a leader. Whether it's optimizing your team, strengthening accountability, or building the right systems for growth, this podcast is here to support you in scaling smarter. So if you're ready to create a business that thrives without requiring more of you, let's get started. Hey there, everybody. It's Derek Fredrickson here, and welcome back to the COO Solution Podcast. Very excited to introduce our guest to you today. Melissa Ortiz is with us. Welcome, Melissa. It's great to have you on the show.
Howdy. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's great to be here with you. We're going to talk a lot today about team dynamics, team roles, team clarity, and then some tools and best practices that Melissa is going to share with us today, including one particular assessment called the Predictive Index that we're going to dive into a bit that's going to help with all things team related. So I always like to ask this question first to our guests, Melissa. So we're going to talk about, like I said, team dynamics and role clarity and everything else. But why this topic, meaning why this area of team dynamics, role clarity? Why is it something that we're talking about today? Like, why is it pertinent now? And also, why you? Why is this something that you're passionate about? So a few questions all kind of bundled in there into one. So I'm going to let you just kind of kick things off and talk a little bit about that.
Sure. I have always been fascinated with what makes people tick. And people are so infinitely unique, and they bring all these different dynamics to the table. And when we get it right, I think hopefully all your listeners have worked on a high-performing team, and that energy is something we all would like to get back to. And so this idea of building a dream team, it doesn't just happen by magic. It happens when we all know exactly what role we're playing. It happens when we are in the right seat and become a valued member. And we get to this point where we're a winning team on an inspiring mission. And it doesn't matter if you're a paid employee or an unpaid volunteer, everybody wants those three criteria: a valued member of a winning team on an inspiring mission. And God, if we can get those three elements for everybody in the organization, we have done something not just for our profitability, not just for our teams and our customers, but also for our community. Because when I go home and I'm an engaged employee who's in the right seat, I have more energy for my family, my physical well-being, my faith, my community, anything that matters to me. Turns out I still have gas left in the tank. Even if I did more work, I worked longer hours, but because it's the right seat, I'm contributing the best of who I am. And so to me, it's like this mutual benefit that really matters beyond just the work.
Yeah, I love that. And why is this important for you? Tell us a little about you and your journey to get to this area. I always like to ask our guests that bring important topics to the conversation and the work that we're doing at the COO Solution, where we're looking for experts in the areas of team, or it might be in the finance or AI or anything like that. But why is this something that's really important and passionate for you? How did this come about for you individually?
So I have this core value called I hate waste. And my team says we have to phrase it something nicer, like waste not, want not. But really, I hate wasted time. I hate wasted money, wasted talent, wasted enthusiasm, wasted energy. I hate waste. And I think that's what I look around our economy and I see so many people who are in the wrong job, who are miserable. Organizations are underperforming because we know we should work on our team health, but it seems like something we can do next quarter. There's never a good time to get better at team health. We have to work on our financials. Oh, our team health affects all of these ripple effects of everything else we do. I was doing a role clarity session actually yesterday with a new general manager who was it was his first day on the job. And it was the CEO and the general manager. And we were defining exactly where he will spend his time and also the importance of those time expenditures. And while the working on team and performance and individual development was only like 10% of his time allocation, when we looked at the importance, the CEO said, this is 60 or 70% of the total importance of your job. Because if we don't do this right, all your other work and all of our other metrics will lag. That's really astute of this leader to be so clear about that piece. So for me, it's about waste.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Yeah, I like the word. It's fine. It's got a good tang to it. It's very compelling. So let's talk about this role clarity. We're going to get into a lot of different things around team dynamics, role clarity, obviously right people, right seats. You know, our audience has heard that expression before, but in the work that you do with companies, especially those companies that are growing and scaling, what does role clarity really mean? And why is it sometimes often, like you said, maybe overlooked or it kind of like punted down the field? We'll get to that later. Like, what does that really mean in the work that you do with companies when you talk about role clarity?
I've been doing employee engagement work for almost 20 years, Derek. And one of the things we consistently see is if an employee doesn't have clear expectation, understand the expectations of their job, they are significantly less likely to be engaged and contribute at high levels. Because engagement is all about discretionary extra effort, right? It's above and beyond the basics that I pay you for to not fire you. I want people going above and beyond. And so if I know what's expected with total clarity, so on our survey, it's a 5. A 5 is a hell yes. Unquestionably, I know what you expect. I know how to prioritize when things get busy. I know what the purpose is. I have a lot of clients that operate on EOS. We have the accountability chart and we have our scorecards, and that should create a lot of clarity. But also, a lot of times our leaders don't clarify, where do I want you to spend your time? What does the holistic development of your role look like? And even if we created a job description, which you may have glanced at when you started, that might have been,
if it's there, yeah.
If it's there, maybe we just put a job ad out and we thought that would be sufficient because it's a controller role, right? You know what to do as a controller. But if we get to the level of specifying, why does this job exist? Why am I paying someone to sit in this seat, virtually or physically? Then what are the key buckets and roles and responsibilities and metrics? But then a level deeper around, what do each of those buckets mean? Like for an engineering role, I scoped with a visionary and an integrator, CEO and a COO the other day. CEO was saying, yes, this is a senior engineer role, and part of his role will be business development. And for an engineer, they look sideways and go, excuse me, business development? Yeah. And the CEO said, we need to mine your network because if we don't, we won't have engineering work to do. And the guy goes, oh, that sounds realistic. And so it's like, what does that even mean? Well, it really means taking your friends to lunch and sometimes doing free consulting work. Oh, well, I can do that. That doesn't sound quite so intimidating. So this, key bucket of business development, if we break it down and say, okay, what is it? How much time do I expect you to attribute? That's the type of clarity we're trying to get to. So nobody wants to suck at work is one of my core beliefs. Nobody comes to work every day and says, I want to do a poor job. People want to thrive. People want to contribute. So if we tell them, here's what a contribution looks like, they're more likely to be able to rise to that occasion and deliver on our expectations that sometimes we haven't done a good job of clarifying for ourselves or for them.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, there's so much just in that alone. I love this distinction in the difference between, say, a job description, like a job posting, and then like, what are the actual responsibilities? And sometimes, like you said, a team member gets brought in based on a job description, but then when they're in the role, it's like, well, that's almost kind of put to the side. And it's like, what are my actual responsibilities? I can look back and see what it said on the job description, but it's not really detailed or it's not really fleshed out in a way that fully explains, well, these are my responsibilities. This is what I own. This is what I'm accountable for. When that is the case, I mean, we've worked with clients and inevitably team is always something that we have to dive into. It's always one of those like, okay, let's make sure we've got the right people in the right seats. And sometimes we kind of open the hood and get underneath and talk to some of the team members. And they're like, I don't really know what my role is. I'm not really clear what my responsibilities are. And then, so how do you define that into a point where, like maybe an example you could share or some best practices about how do you get them to really understand, okay, now this is what I know. These are my responsibilities. This is what I know I can own. And also making sure that, whether it's the integrator or the founder, they're clear on what to expect of the team member and the team member is clear of what's expected of them? Like, how do you do that exactly?
And do we know where the lines are between our responsibilities if we're peers? Because then I know who to ask for what and what I'm supposed to be saying no to. Because I think one of the things I see, Derek, is that we have too many teams that mean well and they're tripping over each other to do all the things because they don't know where the lines of demarcation of, okay, this is your role, this is mine. Most companies have some kind of accountability chart or org chart that starts that conversation. And I think that's where we often stop. We have this job description. We've checked the box on that 3 or 4 years ago, and we created this org chart, and that should get everybody in the right direction. But if we take the time to slow down a minute, it's usually the founder or the owner or like the general manager that is the one who can provide the most clarity because they have this bird's eye view and they know when they see people wasting time and their hackles go up. They know when people are really owning it, but they often struggle to describe it. And so this often becomes a facilitated process of pulling from their heads, what do you want this person to do? And, oh, but isn't there a people component to that? Oh yeah, there really is. Okay, well, what does that mean? And it's a back and forth negotiation that I find. I have this process where I could send them a link to take this role review process and go through it and they could write it out loud. But what they do at every level, I'm talking office manager all the way up to CEO, will sit with it and they'll look at it and they'll think about it and they'll overanalyze it and then they'll revise it and then they'll time out 7 hours later. And then it's like, if we just get on a call and we go through the process, in an hour, you will be done. You will have clarity. Usually the employee in question, like say this is done for performance management perspective. We have someone who's not quite meeting the bar and we know they're the right person in the organization, but for whatever reason, they're just not owning it right now. If we can get on with that person, talk it through, and the person gets all these questions answered, gets clarity. Like I had one yesterday, a gentleman who was just stepping into a general manager role. We went through this process and he said, I'm going to print out this outline. It's basically just an elegant outline of what do you do here. And he said, I'm going to print 10 of these. And for the next 10 weeks, I'm going to check every box on this sheet. And I'm going to bring it to my one-on-one with the CEO and say, here's where I'm knocking it out of the park. Here's where I have questions. And here's where I'm really struggling. I was like, okay, that's beautiful and very task oriented. And I totally admire that because it's such a one pager that you can own. And you can bring it to performance reviews. We can use it for onboarding and say, you need to do this by 30 days, this by 60, this by 90. And it becomes this living document that we say, scratch this off. This doesn't matter anymore. You gave that to Johnny. You're now taking on this other responsibility.
It sounds like in some respect, the clarity of the role actually starts and is defined with, in this case, the general manager or the founder. Like they have to get really, really clear before the team member is really, really clear because they're the ones that are determining we have this right seat, we need to bring the right person on board, but they need to get really clear and kind of set that team member up for success before they actually go and put somebody that's actually in the seat. So it's that clarifying process. And I love what you shared about the idea of maybe doing it together, like doing it with somebody. Let me hold your hand. Let me walk you through the process, because in some cases, left to their own devices, they're not going to necessarily do that on their own because it's like not easy work. They have to really think through, what is this person going to be doing? What do I want them to own? What are the responsibilities? And so it starts with the founder. It starts with the owner or the COO in some respect, and getting really, really clear there, and then cascading that down to the team member to make sure that they're feeling set up for success.
And could we start from the bottom up and do a convenience store clerk? Yeah, we absolutely could. There are a lot of roles that in themselves have pretty clear definition. Usually where the murkiness gets is at the higher levels, managers and above. One of the things I see so often in our engagement work is we do this thing we call working managers, where you're supervising people. You're responsible for the development, but also you have all this bucket of work to do. And guess what gets done over and over and what doesn't get done? The work gets done. The people stuff gets missed because no one was explicit to say, oh, no, you can say, hold please on my actual work because I have to invest in my one-on-ones. Because if I don't, I will never be able to achieve the next level, and neither will these people. And so the team piece really weaves in when we get clarity between each other and we can glance at each other's overview. And now I know, like, one of the pieces in engagement is I'm surrounded by people who are holding their own. Well, I can ask if you're a hard worker and everybody will say yes. But the work ethic on my team is impressive to me. Wow, that's a high bar.
Yeah. And in your experience, when you do this with a client, with the organization, how often do you find it's best to revisit this? Meaning, let's say we've done this exercise and the founders align and the team members align and they're like this, so they're both clear and on the same page in terms of responsibilities and accountability and what they own and everything else. At what point does that need to be revisited? Or maybe how do they know that that may need to be revisited? Is it a combination of when things start to feel like they're going off the rails, or is it something like every 6 months, let's kind of bring back into the current state of what was there 6 months ago to where we are now, and things are looking and feeling a bit different? Like, how do you gauge when that needs to be brought to the table again?
I like for this to be a living process, Derek. So if we have this as part of our weekly same page meetings, every time we're meeting in our one-on-one, we're just taking a quick look through, hey, any questions, any areas I can, barriers I can remove for you as a manager. Once a month, we can say, is any of this irrelevant? Because it happens, especially in growing organizations, things move so fast. So even sometimes 6 months is too long. And so if it's something we're touching all the time, we're literally just drawing arrows off to the right side of the page, like this went to Sal. We don't have to make these really complicated systems and processes for clarity to exist. Should we refresh the outline every 6 months or a year? Yeah, probably. But I'm way less concerned about that than getting the foundation right and then getting really messy with these papers. And the tangible piece too of having something printed in your hand that is your guiding document can be really valuable.
Yeah, and team members like that. They like clarity. They like certainty. They like the lane to be well defined so they know what they need to be doing, how they need to be doing it, what's expected of them, and that kind of benchmark to feel like, how am I doing? Am I doing well? Am I meeting your expectation? Is there other things that I could be doing that make it more efficient or more effective, or can I expand and improve what my responsibilities are? I appreciate that it's something that needs to be revisited time and time again, especially, and I'm sure you've witnessed and experienced this, great, we've done this role clarity and then we're kind of in the business, and like the next day, other stuff comes in, like, can you help us with this? Can you help us with that? And like, we've got this other project, and they dive in, and like 3 months later, it's like things have shifted because businesses that are scaling at multiple seven figures, we're moving quickly and we're adapting and we're pivoting. We have to. And so team members that are willing to throw their hat in the ring and jump in and do whatever it takes is great. But then sometimes they're like looking at a step back, and I'm involved with this, and now I'm involved with that, and I'm over here and I'm over there. And now they're thinking like, I'm not really clear on exactly what my role is again.
I'm stretched so thin that I don't know how to win anymore.
Yeah.
And so if we can help them go back to the basics, like, what are your core responsibilities? Like, one of the things my admin is constantly reminding me of is she struggles if I don't give her a due date on everything I ask her for, because she's looking at all the things I've dumped on her plate and saying, okay, well, I can reprioritize based on the due dates. And I'm notoriously terrible. Everything to me should be done right now. But
yeah, exactly. I need it done yesterday.
That's a constant back and forth. And so her task tracker that I'm always adding to and she's always updating has a due date for everything. That really helps us stay aligned, even if we're not.
Yeah. Awesome. Shift gears a little bit. So I want to talk about predictive index. In the work that we do, there are many assessments that are out there. And that's actually one of the things that we use with our clients, because we find assessments incredibly effective and just so impactful. And I know there's different types and different shapes and forms. There are some that are more personality based. There are some based on what your strengths are, different components. And they're always, I always say, you're never too cool for school, right? So if there's an assessment out there that's going to help you, sounds very cliche, but when you know better, you do better, right?
Yes.
And so talk to us about predictive index, because you use predictive index, you're skilled at it, you're an expert at it, you know it. Why predictive index? Just give us a little bit of background and context as to what it is, and then we could dive into how you use it more specifically with teams.
So I will go up a level actually from your question and say, I think assessments are like wine. The wine you like is the wine you should drink. The assessment you like is the one you should use. Because if you can integrate it, take it from something fun we did on Tuesday for a team health activity to something we've integrated through hiring, onboarding, coaching, career pathing, feedback sessions, terminations eventually, potentially. That is when we get some traction with assessments. It's not that we did this one this year and then the next quarter we did another one and then 2 years later we did another one. That is fun and actually does boost morale, but it doesn't get sticky where we learn a language. So my first one that I went really deep with was the Gallup Strengths Finder. I worked for Gallup in San Francisco and in Houston, and I love the Strengths Finder. However, what I'm finding in our current marketplace is it takes 45 minutes of uninterrupted time to take, and that is a challenge for a lot of our brains and our schedules, and it is not EEOC compliant for hiring. So all these executives say, ooh, woo is one of the strengths, winning others over. And people are like, I just want to hire a bunch of woos to be my salespeople. Turns out, A, that's not legal, and B, it's actually not that effective, because what they end up doing is just having a lot of fun, and they're not necessarily aiming it at performance. And so when I found Predictive Index, they actually reached out to me and said, we think you'd be a really good implementer for our tools and consultant. Would you consider taking this on? That was, 8 years ago. And it's been such a great partnership. I love that it's 5 minutes to take. I had a CEO say, oh, I did it on the plane. I think mine's wrong. I want to retake it. I'm like, great, retake it. And he says, it was exactly the same.
Yeah. That's a sign of a good assessment, is that if you try to take it again, and as long as you don't fake it, right? You don't want to not be truthful, but if you do it again and you're doing it honestly, it's not really going to change. Yeah.
It's not going to change. Our talents are set by the time we're about 15 years old. And what happens is we become more sophisticated, more mature versions of ourselves and get better at leveraging the talents we already have. The superhighways in our brain, we start using them more efficiently. And so if we can understand among our team, what are the superhighways in their brain? One of my favorite team health activities is to figure out who's a think to talk person and who's a talk to think person. Some people who think outside their mouths and some people who think inside their heads. And if the people who think inside their heads, if you call them out of the blue, if you have them at a meeting that needs decisions without an agenda or decision points ahead of time, you will fluster them. And what will end up happening is they'll come back to you with a different decision the next day because they kept thinking about it, which is not efficient because somebody else has already taken 3 steps based on those decisions we made. And so like with the think to talk people, I say, for the love of God, please give them a text before you call, an agenda before a meeting invite so they know what's coming. And then if you can give them 5 minutes, 5 hours, or 5 days to make the decision, please do that. You will get better quality of thinking. They will have more confidence and you will be a better partner to them. People who are talk to think, they're like, just jump in my office any day. Call me anytime.
Exactly. It's so true. I mean, I know exactly who I am. I'm a think to talk person. I love that think to talk or talk to think. Just in that example, this is going to come across, I have to caveat this by saying, because it might seem like I don't like spending time with people. That's not true. But however, if somebody's reaching out or, sometimes even a team member and they say, I've got something I want to talk to you about. Can I grab like 15, 20 minutes? I say, sure, of course, happy to. What do you want to talk about specifically? Just so I can mentally prepare. Because if I've been in those situations where I don't know what we're talking about, I don't know the context, I don't know the topic, I don't know the agenda, I don't know if you're going to be asking questions that I'm unprepared for, and I need to think to gather my thoughts strategically before I express, it catches me off guard and I don't feel aligned because then I feel like I'm not operating in a way that honors my talents and my abilities. I love that analogy of talk to think and think to talk.
I have this great example from this week, actually. I run a swim team for 100 kids every summer, ages 4 to 18. And we have 3 paid coaches and a board. My husband had asked for a board meeting. He's on the board as well. And the coaches had asked for a coaches meeting, but then it didn't happen right away and everybody kind of forgot. And then I was able to get our coaches and our board together. And there was all this flutter about, oh, what's the meeting about? Everybody got really nervous. So I sent a text to everyone. I said, just to be clear, we want to talk about how's the season going so far? What do you need from us as a board? How are we doing on our board responsibilities and make sure nothing's slipping through the cracks? And everybody went, oh, okay. But it was like, what's going on?
I love that. I love it. So I want to ask a question. We're going to talk more about predictive index, but just in this example alone, this is very profound because I believe that a majority of the people that we work with, founders, entrepreneurs, are more of the talk to think, right? You give them an idea or you put something on the table and they're going to jump right into it. They're going to start coming up with the idea or the next steps, just kind of brainstorming. I didn't make up this expression, but I love it, which is they're going to take spaghetti and throw it at the wall and kind of see what sticks. Integrators, chief operating officers, we're more wired, we're more aligned in the talent of think to talk. And so my question for you is, knowing that in a scaling a business, you've got this partnership between the CEO and the COO, and knowing that there's a bit of a spread there between talk to think CEO, think to talk COO, how do you get those to work together so it doesn't feel like oil and water, but you're not making them feel like they're both kind of operating outside of their comfort zone? Or maybe do they have to a little bit in order to feel like they're together?
I think the most valuable thing, because at the end of the day, the founder is the CEO is running the ship. And As a COO, you are second in command, and your job is to bring their ideas to life. I tend to find they become really good listeners. They become really good note takers. Like, okay, let me make sure I get this right. And as they're asking all their questions, they're forcing the CEO to talk it out, which is what they're wired to do anyway. So they're taking all these notes. And as they're taking notes, they're doing this parallel processing because they usually have pretty strong mental horsepower, cognitive ability. And so it's this back and forth. But when they see themselves as the translator of ideas from the spaghetti on the wall to what are we going to do next, that is when our COOs really thrive, because they're asking questions. They're thinking often about their team members and saying, Jennifer's going to need to know this. What's your first blush thought on that? Kevin's always going to want to know these questions. They start to know their audience of who they're translating for, and they preemptively ask those ideas. And as the CEO talks out these ideas, once in a while they'll go, you're right, this is a terrible idea. I didn't even say this is a terrible idea. You told me it was a terrible idea. When you position yourself as that middleman, that translator, I think it becomes easier because you don't have to do the talking. You have to do the thinking and the asking. And then you can come back and say, okay, I've evaluated your 4 ideas. I think this one has, and the team thinks this one has the most merit. Not putting the pressure on them, but they've got to be able to see the horizon with the CEO and then translate it onto the table of what's next.
Yeah, and it's often just the awareness, knowing that there's a difference between think to talk, talk to think, and using that in a way as you have conversations, as you're collaborating with team or you're communicating with your leadership team or whatever it is, just having that awareness. And when everybody's aware with that in an organization, because I love your, whatever the best wine is that is for you, like stick to that wine. So exactly. Break it down for us. And of course, there'll be a link for individuals to go and take the assessment. But like, how does predictive index work and how to use it more either for role clarity or in a hiring process? So tell us a little bit more kind of practical speaking and how that works.
So I think there's 2 components that I love to PI. There's if and how. So how you approach the role, that's your natural rubber band at rest. And that's PI, what they call the self. So what is my natural approach to the world? So mine is I have a high A factor is what they call it. I have a high dominance. I like to be in the driver's seat. I love it. It's so fun. I love to figure out where we're going and look ahead to the horizon. The if part I love with PI is so dang simple. We could get together as a leadership team or whoever the right stakeholders are for a given role. And we say, what are the ideal qualities? What are the demands of a role, say for quality control? I've had a couple of those come up with my manufacturing clients in the last couple of weeks. We have everybody give separate input, and then we define an ideal candidate. This perfect candidate, they came through the door and they had the right resume and they were perfect culture fit. We were like, oh my gosh, nailed it. We're winning here. But there are also, of that ideal candidate, there will be non-negotiable. So if you take the quality control role, if they don't have anal retentive baked into their hardwired into their personality, they're probably going to cost us money. They're not a detailed gnat's ass, like really, really observant person that cares about the rules and the specs. I don't care if they have 30 years of quality control experience, they're going to cost us money because they will miss them. That's the thing I love about PI. Like when I was working at Gallup, it was $250,000 per role to define an ideal candidate. We do all the research with all their top performers and it was amazing work. But with PI, we can do it in 45 minutes. It's amazingly efficient, effective. And we just crowdsource from the people who know the role, say a high performer, someone who's managing that role. What is it? Then as we compare candidates, my recommendation, I was sharing this with somebody yesterday who said, we're using PI through somebody else. We're not getting our value worth. I'm like, oh, these are my favorite topics because they were using PI way too late in the process. And I said, put it up front. You don't want to talk to anyone that doesn't have some aptitude for success. You're wasting their time and everybody's time internally. So if you put it up front and you're like, behaviorally and cognitively, this person's a dead ringer. Then you do the phone screen. You're like, wow, I really like them. I like their resume. Okay, let's talk to them and let's see if we think there's a culture fit here.
There's this filter, which often, like you said, we put at the end because we're looking first at kind of skill set and expertise. Yes, we need that. Experience. Have they done the work? Have done it well before? Yes. And then there's like, well, let's have a conversation. But then there's also like this kind of litmus test that actually, like, let's make sure we're not getting a square peg in a round hole because what's on a resume is hiring copy, right? It's going to work well for the candidate. And especially when they know the job description, they're going to be able to speak to that. And, you know, obviously people aren't about fudging up on what they've done for experience, but anything else. But this assessment kind of cuts through the clutter and gets to the core to make sure that they're aligned and they're going to be able to do the job and do it well. And again, it kind of goes back to what we talked about at the beginning. Like when you do that clarity from the get-go, as opposed to halfway through or finishing up the recruitment process, it's going to save you so much more time and effort. So I love that part.
I have a couple complaints, actually. So as we're thinking about the candidate space, one complaint is I think it's way too easy right now to apply for a role on LinkedIn and Indeed. It's this easy apply button. It's already loaded with your resume and poof, I've applied to 116 jobs today, but I didn't even read the specs on any of them. If we put a little barrier in the process, 2 years ago, we might have had 4 candidates for a role. Today, we might have 40, 140, 400 candidates if it's a fully remote role. And how are you supposed to sort through that clutter? Your eyes go cross-eyed when you're looking at too many resumes. So if we can get one more step in the process, A, we see who's actually interested in the job and committed enough to do the next step. And B, it protects our time because we only have so much to go around.
It's just using this assessment. Like you said, I love this. It's true. I mean, it's so easy. The one click, here's 40 job applicants. And they're like, oh my gosh, I got to sift through all this information and everything else. But the assessment kind of qualifies them in a way and kind of puts them to the top because they've already kind of fit the profile. One more question about predictive index. Have you seen this happen in the past where somebody does the assessment and maybe also in the work that you do with teams, like once they get that clarity and they kind of are identified like, yes, that actually is who I am. I didn't really see it in that way. I never really kind of identified. I just kind of took it for granted because that's naturally how I am and how I do things.
Isn't that how everybody works? We all think everybody sees the world the way we do.
Yeah. It's like this assessment is like, okay, I feel like almost understood. I feel like I'm really identifying who I really am. Have you seen that where people like have like almost like an aha moment where it's really profound for them? I mean, I know it's an assessment, but still it kind of opens up all these doors because they feel more understood. They feel more clear. They feel more welcome in what they're doing. Has that happened in your experience?
I feel like it's this permission slip to forgive each other our trespasses. Like we had this one guy named Kevin, and Kevin they called Chicken Little because the sky was always falling and he was always worried about everything. He always was telling everybody on the team why everything was wrong about their approach. And so with a good assessment, what we ended up doing was flipping the script and we put Kevin in the front of the process and we would bring Kevin the draft. Everything was a draft. And we'd say, what do you think about this? And he'd say, well, here's the 40 problems with this. Oh, he's not wrong about that. And then we go back and we fix it. And then we bring in draft number 2 and he'd say, I have a concern about these 3 things. Good point. Good point. We don't want to launch without fixing those. So go back. You bring him draft number 3 and he goes, I don't like these 2 things. And you say, I can live with that. The thing that frustrated the team, you flipped the script and you went, you're not wrong. And you're just trying to protect our team, even though you might be a little like, hard to hear because it's kind of mean. You're not wrong. So how do we pull that out of people, put them on a pedestal for what they do right, and use that for our own team betterment? That's the language a good assessment can give us. And so then I have a project manager, Jennifer, who every single meeting I have with her, I end with, what did I miss? Because she always needs more data than I do, more information and more detail. I don't need that, so I don't provide it. And she always finishes. She knows I'm going to ask, and she's always ready to answer the question. And I'm like, I can give you that answer now, that answer by Tuesday, and I just don't know on the third one.
Oh, that's great. That's great. I love that. As we wrap up, any other kind of final insight, strategy you can share, question to have our audience think about in some way, as we've talked about lots of things with team and clarity and roles and predictive index. Anything else you want to share with our listeners having to do with this topic that can really take it to another level or just kind of, carry it home so that it really lands for them?
So I want to make one more point on PI that I think we didn't cover, and I think is super valuable for our growing organizations who are usually pretty cash strapped. And it's this: if we scope the ideal candidate in PI and we find someone who doesn't have all the experience, we can identify the diamonds in the rough. And they're cheaper because they don't have all the credentials to sing their praises. But if we find that person who just gets it, we can give someone an opportunity to grow with us at a lower base cost. That's one of my favorite things, is it takes some of the bias out of the hiring process that we put so much onus on the resume. One of the things I read recently in a psychology book was that we generally have the emotional maturity of an 8-year-old. The average adult has the emotional maturity of an 8-year-old. And so this is a way to help us grow and understand getting comfortable in our own skin, owning the things we do well, and being able to say, I'm not the final check on this because that's not a good role for me. And it makes it easier to ask for help, to be vulnerable and say, oh, this is not my wheelhouse. But God, you know who is Bobby. Bobby is great at this. I see it in blue collar more than I see in white collar, where we own our expertise and we know what we don't know. Whereas in white collar jobs, I think we've gotten to this point where we think we need to be all things to all people. And if we aren't, we can chat GPT it and figure it out in 5 minutes. But expertise actually has value. And if you keep honing your expertise, that allows other people to stay in their lanes, which is where role clarity comes in. What should I be doing? The if, and then how, what's my natural approach? And then what am I actually doing is that role? And I think those together can just make for so much more efficiency on our teams and less frustration and less wasted resource, which it all comes back to waste, right?
There you go. That comes back to the waste. I know I said before it cuts through the clutter, but it's like this core. It gets to the core to making sure that we're spending the right time in the right way in the beginning to find the right person in the right seat. And we all know that when we don't spend the time to do that in a thoughtful, strategic, assessment-led way, chances are down the road, it could work, and sometimes it does. But in some cases, often we know that it doesn't. And as you've heard, and I'm sure you're an expert at this, it costs a lot more time, energy, and effort, which usually is an expense to, okay, well, we invested 6 months in this, take that person out, and now we're going to do the whole process again 6 months later. It's just, if you do it from the beginning, you could have a unicorn on your team that feels so empowered, so aligned, so clear, just rah-rah about what they're doing and how they're doing it. And that's what you want, because then you've got more aligned right people at right seats, and that's how you scale. So yeah.
Well, this has been awesome. I'm so curious about how this resonates with you and what you see, but I feel like we're probably out of time and love to.
Yeah, I'll just share for me, I think I love, especially in the area of team, because it's such an important topic for our audience, especially for entrepreneurs that are scaling. They don't know what they don't know about bringing on a right team. And I love the example, whether it's, strengths with the woo example, sometimes like attracts like, and they're like, oh, I need to bring on somebody to do operations. I like that person. They're like me. I'll bring them on board, right? And it's like, okay, it's great, but that's not aligned with what you really need for the role. You're going more on instinct, which is important, but we also need to get to the facts. We also need to get really crystal clear. And I think this is where we step in with our clients to help really clarify and ask the question, what's really required in this role? What are the core responsibilities? And I often say, what are they going to be responsible for? I own it. But also, what are they going to be, or who are they going to be responsible to? That they might be a contributor, but they may not be ultimately owning it, but they have a level of accountability. So just this idea of another perspective when it comes to working with teams, hiring teams, and just understanding that if you're sensing or feeling that perhaps there's a team member that's not aligned, not clear, or it's feeling more like a square peg in a round hole, it's probably because we didn't do the work up front to get clear, and we're not using an assessment like predictive index to just make that even more transparent from the beginning. So I love this topic.
The expectation I like to set, Derek, is there is no silver bullet. None of this is foolproof, but it's an insurance policy. It's one level above. Typical process of using our intuition and looking at resumes and interviews is about a 50% success rate. So flip a coin and just hire a person because it's a 50-50 shot. If we can continually increase that probability of success, that's what we're trying to do here. Because we will never get to 100% perfection on hiring, but we can keep improving our odds, and that's all we're trying to do.
I often say there's no such thing as team utopia, but with things like this, we can get as close to it as possible. So that's amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. How can people find out more about you, your company, Activate Human Capital Group, Predictive Index? Just tell us where they can find out more about you, your company, and what you do.
Yeah, so ActivateHCG, like humancapitalgroup.com is our website. You can find me on LinkedIn, Melissa Ortiz. We're pretty easy to find. I love this work and love to share this enthusiasm with people.
Thank you for that. And we'll include all the links in the show notes so they can go and check out Melissa. And again, thank you for being here today. And thank you for joining us today for the COO Solution Podcast. And we'll see you on a future episode. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Derek. Take care.
And that's a wrap on this episode of the COO Solution Podcast. If you found today's conversation valuable, I'd love it if you could subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who's ready to get control of their business and scale it with a second in command that they trust to handle all the daily tasks and operations they don't enjoy. And hey, maybe you're wondering if now is the time to bring on a trusted fractional COO or Chief Operating Officer to help your thriving business scale with clarity and confidence. If you're tired of doing it alone, visit thecoosolution.com and take our free quiz to help determine if now is the right time to bring a fractional COO to help you scale. In just 25 questions, you'll get a personalized report that helps you decide if your business is ready for the game-changing support of a part-time fractional COO. Let's find out together if it's your next step. Thanks for tuning in, and until next time, let's roll up our sleeves and get to work.